Hey there, this is James Darknell, the Mutant Pixel, and I'm coming at you with another MODO tutorial. This week I want to show you how to make grass blow in the wind. So we're not going to be doing anything fancy with dynamics, or we're not going to be doing any crazy simulations or anything that's really CPU calculation intensive. We're just going to be applying a basic deformer onto some guides that we're going to be using to control a fur layer. And what that looks like in MODO is like this. So these are what the various guides moving around, and they're being controlled by this locator here. And then when you apply a fur layer and render that out, that looks like this. So I think that's a pretty convincing windy grass sort of look to that. So let's jump into MODO and see what the process is to make our grass blow in the wind. So here I am in MODO, and I just have my basic grass plane here. So you can see that I've just taken a plane. It's about maybe 2.5 meters by almost 2 meters wide here. So it's not a very large patch, and I've just done some basic sculpting here just to show you so that it's not a perfectly flat. This doesn't have to be on flat ground in order to get this sort of look. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is we want to generate our guides. So we can do that very easily by jumping into our paint layout. So I'm just using Control Tab there to jump into the paint layout. And here under the toolbox, if we look under the guides, there's a number of tools for creating guides that you can use with the fur settings. So what I'm going to do is just take the Create Guides, and I have my maximum number of guides set at 1,000, but I think the default is only 100, so you might want to increase this because we want to make sure that we have a guide that's going to basically grow out of every vertex position along this plane. So I'm just going to click in the viewport, and as you click out, you'll see how the guides start to grow out. And these ones are growing out at various different angles here, and I actually want them to all be fairly straight because it's just going to make it a little bit easier to do what we're doing. So I'm going to go in here to the maximum number of segments, and I want to make sure that it's just 2. We just want the starting point and the end point. So each one of those segments, if we had more than those, there would be more points we'd have to deal with. It's going to be just easier for our purposes if we just have the 2 segments. And then I'm going to make the length just really short on these, so that they're just barely visible. So you can see now we got just tiny little guides on there, and I'm going to hit the Q tool to drop that. So now I've generated my fur guides. Now the number one thing that you want to do when applying materials to this later on is you want to make sure that the guides share the same material name as the polygons that they're growing from. So now that I've created the guides, I'm going to hit the M key. I'm just going to call this grass here. And then just give this a green color. Click OK. And then to make our guides a little bit easier to see, I'm going to set the guide color here, and I want to override that guide. I'm going to give that a dark green color. So now the problem with these guides is they're very short, so I want to lengthen these. So I'm going to do that just by creating a quick selection and then transforming them. So we're just going to go over here to where our properties panel is, and we want to go here to lists. And we're going to go down here to the vertices, and then we're going to select our curves effectively by their edge. So we want to go in here and select all of the vertices that are only connected to one edge. And by doing that, then we're just selecting the tip of our little curves that we've just created. So then we could hit the W key to get the transform tool, and then we can move that up. So now we've just created slightly longer guides. We can make those a little bit longer just so they're easier to see what we're going to be doing with them. So then now that I've moved them up, I'm going to hit Q. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to apply the Transform Effector. And this is what's actually going to be moving these points around and animating the guides. So that is applied most easily in our setup layout. So I like to use the Control Tab switcher. So I'm going to switch over here to my setup layout. And then making sure that our vertices are still selected, we want to go over here to deformers in the toolbox, and we want to just click on the transform deformer. And that's going to do a fantastic thing for us. What that's going to do is it's going to add in our transform effector and then our transform item here. And you can see that it's based on a weight map, and it's created a transform weight map on there. So it's basically applied 100% weight only to the vertices that were selected. So now we can go in, and if we jump into items mode on that, we have this locator selected. If I just get the move tool there, you can see as I move that around, it is moving my guides all at the same time, but it's only moving the tips of them because that's what was selected when I created this transform effector. So you can see now all my guides are still there. So something I want to do, this is just personal preference for me, what I like to do is I want my guide, so you can see it's positioned the guide at basically the center of the selection. Whatever you had selected, it's going to put that locator that you're going to be transforming all those with at that center position. And just for me, I want to put it at the 0, 0, 0. So if I try to do that right now, it's going to move them all down, and it's not going to do what I want to do. So I want this to be transforming from there. So I want to go into my setup mode, and this is going to set up my base position for things. So then I can take this guy, put him at 0, and then I can get back out of setup mode. And then now, as I move this from 0, 0, you can see it's moving from that position. Alright, so that is the start of animating our guides. And somewhere along the line, it seems as though we've lost our guide color. So I'm going to jump back into the paint thing here. And set the guide color. Oh, maybe we didn't lose it. I just have it too dark. Maybe if I make it a different color altogether, it'll be easier to see. That is quite garish, but we can see better, I think, over in this layout. Oh, what's going on with the guides. Alright, so I don't want to have to set up keyframes individually to move around this transform locator. So what I want to do is I want to apply some modifiers to it that are going to animate this thing automatically for me. So if we click on this little guy here, this is going to open up my schematic view. And this schematic view, I'm not going to go really deep into this. Hopefully you're familiar with this. But it's just a way that we can sort of visually program different aspects of a scene. So by pulling my transform effector, just clicking and dragging it from the items list in here, it places the item into the schematic view. And then from there I can start connecting elements together. So what the elements that I want to work with specifically on this are the position. So you can see that when I've selected this, the position X, Y, and Z are highlighted orange. That means they're selected. So you can double click on these guys to select them. Just double clicking on the name selects all 3 channels. And then from there, we can go back to schematic and say add selected. And what this has done is it's added in the channels now, the inputs and the outputs for X, Y, and Z. So that is what we are going to be affecting. So now I'm going to add in some channel modifiers. So these are things that will automatically modify these channels for us. So I think the ones that I want to, or the one that I want to use is going to be the channel noise. And what this is it just outputs a variable, a random variable value that's based on a noise function. So it's not always going to be the same value. So these are the different variables for the noise. So just to show you what happens, I'm just going to put that into the X there. And you can see now if I hit the play, I haven't set any keyframes right now, but it's moving my locator around. And if I were just to take that and also put that into the Z, then it would be moving at 45 degrees, exactly the same in both directions. I just don't think that's a very convincing sort of look on that. So actually what I like to do, or what I'm going to do in this instance, is I'm going to add another channel noise. So we're just going to add another one of these. And I'm going to put this on the Z position. And this one, I'm going to change the seed value. So we can just give that some sort of a random number. And then I'm just going to change the frequencies down a little bit. And then that'll have the X and the Z moving at different frequencies. And it's just going to break that up so it's not going to be the same now. So you can see how that's kind of going all over the place now. Now, traditionally or normally we should be able to go in here and adjust the amplitude, and that's the strength of the value variations. And I'm not sure why, but when I change that value in this case, it sends my locator off, really far, and it just isn't a pleasing effect. So what I'm doing as a workaround for that, I'm not sure if it's a bug or something else, I'm just going to go in here to the math, and I'm just going to multiply these values. So if I take this and I multiply it by 0.1, that's going to scale that down quite a bit. Just do the same thing over here. So by selecting the connectors in between two objects, now when you add these, it automatically wires it up for you. And this one I can 0.2. So now when I hit the play, you see it's scaled those values down considerably. So depending on how fast, whether this is going to be gale force winds or whether it's just going to be a subtle little breeze, you can control this just with this multiplier right here on that value. So whatever output the channel noise is putting, you're just multiplying it by that. So maybe that's a little bit too low. By 3. See what that looks like. Alright, so now we haven't had to do any keyframes on our, and we're getting a fairly decent looking motion now to our little guides. But the problem is all of the guides are moving exactly in sync to each other. So we want to vary them across the field of the grass. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a falloff. So if I go in here and I add a falloff, and I'm going to create a linear falloff, you can see the falloff has been added in here. And if we double click these little diamond shapes here, it's going to extend. So you can see in the transform effector, so if I select my fall off here and I move it around, you can see what it's doing is deforming, and that's exactly what I don't want it to do, and that's the default behavior of the fall off. So we want to turn off this use setup and turn off this deformer enable. And that should get me the results that I'm looking for. Play. So it doesn't look like it's influencing it at all. And that should be easy to say because it is not pushed into the fall offs. It's connected to the geometry. So that's connected to the geometry. I don't think we want this connected at all. Stop. And then we're going to connect this here to the fall off. All right. So now we've solved that problem. So now as we move our fall off, we can see as we move it over the grass, it's everything that's on this side of the fall off, even though our locator's still moving, it's not being affected. And everything that's on this side is being fully affected. So we really want the effect to be fully affecting it, but we want to attenuate this fall off over it with more control. So we're going to apply a texture to that, and that's done in the shader tree. So let's jump over to our shader tree. We got to manually do this because we're just going to get better results that we're going to know what they are. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to add a group. So this is going to end up being my mask. I'm going to control what the noise is going to be pointing towards. So I'm going to go into my item, and I'm just going to select my linear fall off for that. And then within the linear fall off mask, I'm basically just going to apply a noise texture. And you can see the noise texture is going to be working as a fall off value. So this is going to be controlling the fall off where it's influencing it entirely. So if I go in here and hit play now, why does it keep popping up the menu? If I go to the noise itself and I set the gain to something like 99 just to make it really obvious, you can see now that the noise texture, how it's affecting that surface. So if I go in here and grab the fall off and move that, you can see how that's connected to that texture now and it's moving that. And that'll also allow us, kind of stop that there. It's going to allow us to select our noise, and I think it's a little big, so I'm going to go in here and make that, say, 300 millimeters on that. So hit play again. All right, so that gives us a little bit smaller patches there of influence. So I can take this gain and go back to 50%, see what that looks like. Maybe I'm going to increase that back up to like 70. Okay, now, since I'm kind of lazy, I don't want to do a whole ton of animation to get that moving. But if I take this original texture locator, this right here, I can animate this position of the texture locator. And then I can get that texture to move sort of through the grass. And this is kind of where, the magic happens on this, where it gets really that convincing sort of wind blow effect. So we're just going to go down here, make sure our timeline is at the 0 frame, or for me it's fine, it's at the 0. Then I'm just going to get the transform and move this down a ways. And then on the Y, I'm just going to click the little dot right there to set a keyframe for that value. Then I'm just going to go up to, say, frame 100. I'm going to move that up. So you can see as I'm moving that, it's transforming or affecting the position of that texture and how it's affecting that fall off. So all of these pieces are all sort of working together to create this final effect. So now if I hit play again, and what's going on? I need to hit play from frame 0. All right, now it's moving, but you see once I get to frame 100, it stops moving. And since I said I'm kind of lazy, I don't want to set a ton of keyframes and have to do this if my scene changes or anything like that. I'm just going to go into the graph editor. And you can hit A to frame all of your keys that you've created when you're clicking over here. And then I just want to make this linear between those two. And then you can see outside of this frame range, we just want it to offset. So we can have the before behavior be linear. So that graph is just going to keep going down. And then the after, we can make that linear. So this is basically just going to keep animating up and up and up, regardless of what the length of our timeline is. So now, if we go back to the beginning and we hit play, you can see, even though we had to only set 2 keyframes, it's going to continually animate for us. And then it's very easy if you want to change the speed of that, if you think it's moving through there too fast, then you can just go in the graph editor and you can just pull down this one value and you can change the speed along the entire curve just by changing the one value. All right. So I think we are almost done on creating the guides. Basically looks like what we have on our sample. So we can just turn off the fall off and we can take our texture group and hide that just so we don't have those things drawing in our viewport. So now the next thing we're going to do really quick is I'm just going to make some fake grass. This is not the be-all end-all grass tutorial. But I'm just going to go in here to this grass material that we made, and I'm just going to apply a special and then a fur material. And since I knew already that this is roughly about 2.5 meters, I think I'm going to make my spacing be about, 0.75 inches. Sorry, I'm US, so I think in inches and feet. And I think the length, I want it to be about 3 inches. That's going to convert that for me automatically when I enter those values. And then the width of this, I think I'm going to make it be about 90%. And just to make things a lot faster and easier, I'm going to turn our render density down to about 10%. And I think the last thing I'm going to do here is I want to make sure that the guides just say direction. So that way, generally the guides, they'll default to range, and what that does is the guides themselves determine the length and the direction and, you know, several other factors of the fur. And I just want it to control the direction so that we get a little bit more control of it with the settings of the fur itself. So I'm just going to go in here, I think now to the blend amount, and I'm going to blend that, say 100%. And what that's going to do is it's going to blend the direction of one fur fiber to the next one based on the guides surrounding, and that blend angle is going to be this 45 degree there. So I'm just going to have blend between all the various guides, and then I think I want to go in here to bend amplitude. You can see it's very bent right now, and I don't want it to be 50% bend, so I'm going to turn that to like 12. And then to make sure this actually looks like grass, we're going to turn off cylinders. We're going to go to strips. And then I want to change the tapering. So this value right here will let us change, instead of being like a piece of ribbon, consistent width. Just go in here to the tapering. It's easiest to just open this in the graph editor here. So this defines the length from 0 to 100% of our little fur fiber. And if I just go up here to 100, 100 on that, kind of shape that, and then move that up. This is gonna kind of roughly define the shape of our little fur guy here. Set those to linear. All right, so there's my rough approximation. Like I said, this isn't the be-all, end-all fur tutorial. And wow, it looks really bad. And I think that's mostly because it's so thick. So let's go back in here to our spacing. Maybe make that 5 millimeters so it's not so darn wide. Ah, there we go. That looks a lot better already. And the fur material takes its, its shading, its color, all that from the material that's directly related to the group. That's basically the surface it's growing out of. We've all given it the same name. And I'm just going to go in here to the grass. I'm going to set my scope to just fur. So what that's going to do is then the material underneath it then is going to be what's going to be controlling the color. No, so I'm going to go in here to my base material. I'm just going to set the base material now to kind of a brownish color. Just take the lazy man's way out of just creating a ground with some grass. So I'm sure if you're actually doing this, your grass is going to look a lot better than what I'm doing. So that is what the grass looks like. So with all of those settings, we're now done. So now we play this back, you can see the guides are going to be affecting the grass. And if we render this out, which I've already done that with all of these very similar settings anyways, this is the result that we're getting. Okay, minor error here. Just want to, before you run off here, I want to fix this, show you what the fix is. I said that we wanted to go into the fur guides and set that direction. I actually wanted to set that to shape. When we play the simulation, that it's actually moving those fur guides now and giving us the actual grass. If you have it in direction, it's not going to be giving you the results that you want when you render that out. So I apologize for that little error. Seems like it's pretty easy to make. But I hope you enjoy making your grass blowing in the wind. And I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.
Hey, that was pretty cool.